Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Adam and Vanessa Lambert are the creators of Be The Wellness, a personal coaching company with an emphasis on community and adventure. They're committed to building a tribe of wellness warriors, helping people make changes over time to tackle big adventures in life. Whether that means hiking Machu Picchu or losing 10 pounds, the Lamberts empower adventure-seeking souls to master the physiology and mindset needed to live a badass life, all while creating a lovely, supportive community centered on the core values of total inclusion, fun, and innovation. Essentially, they're on a mission to prepare clients to get fit for the experience of life with customized coaching programs and transformational retreats built to nurture the body, mind, and spirit. It's such a pleasure to have Adam and Vanessa on. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Excellent. Look, as soon as I met you guys, everything that I just said now just resonated with me straight away. I could tell that you're really living, it's sort of actually living my mantra, which is living the dream. I really feel like you guys are doing that.
Oh, thank you. Well, we are certainly making a real run at it.
Yeah, a good old college track.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. And to be honest, the only reason I didn't want to have you guys on the show is because I'm totally envious of your lifestyle.
Well, it's one of those things that I think a little bit of jealousy or whatever that is good just to remind us, because it gives us a feeling of like, okay, that's actually a spot that really resonates with us. So I think like sometimes it's a good thing to feel a little bit of that.
Totally. And I'm looking forward for you guys to run a retreat at my retreat center in Australia once I eventually get back there and put it together.
That would be awesome.
But in the meantime, Vanessa, I was maybe wanting to start with you, and maybe if you could just share, I know a bit about your journey, but I'd love for you to share in detail, I guess, how you got to where you got today and your health and fitness journey along the way.
Yeah, definitely. So I was really shy as a kid. And when I say shy, painfully shy, where it was literally hard for me to leave my mom's side. And I, had a really hard time kind of getting myself out there in the world. And so as a byproduct, my mom started putting me in sports at a really young age, which, bless her heart, did me a world of good and really helped to give me the confidence and some of the social skills to stop being so shy. But as an awesome byproduct, I got all of this great, strength and conditioning and proprioception and all these wonderful things that came along with training my body in the various sports that she put me in. And so that kind of set set the foundation for me as I moved through life to always sort of turn towards my physicality and turn towards, being athletic and being physical whenever I came up against anything in life that was difficult or that I felt like I needed some assistance navigating. And so I think the reason that that's important is that, I didn't intend to become a coach and I didn't necessarily set out to do it. But I think what happened was, as a process of realizing how powerfully transformative having these tools and having access to my physicality and my health and my well-being, and how well that impacted the other things I was navigating in my life, it just, little by little, I just became more and more passionate about the power of sharing that. And I think that's a lot of how many of us fall into that, is that we, experience tremendous benefit from these things that we experience in our life. And it feels natural to want to pay that forward. And we got really lucky in the sense that we were living in a small little town in Northern California called Chico, which happened to be where Robb Wolf opened his first gym. And so, lo and behold, Adam and I went into this small little gym one day where was, less than 1,000 square feet. And we started training with Robb and his wife, Nikki. And this kind of just took our wellness journey and sort of our paleo approach, and we started to learn more about the ancestral way of eating and the ancestral way of training. At the time, Robb started one of the first CrossFit gyms. So we started CrossFitting. And before you knew it, we were pretty well indoctrinated into the really early days of CrossFit and that ancestral movement that was happening. And so fast forward about, 7 or 8 years of training with Robb and Nikki, we moved to LA. And Robb introduced us to Mark Sisson. We started running retreats and working with Mark to develop his coaching program. And so all of this stuff just kind of happened as a result of our love for health and fitness. It was really that took us to Robb's gym in the first place. And from there, it seems like the stars just aligned to keep sort of cueing us into this place of, maybe this is actually something we could really make a difference in the world at. And so, yeah, that's kind of that gets you up to speed as far as, how I got here. Adam has his own slight variation of that journey.
Yeah. And just before we move to Adam, I believe you also didn't do too badly yourself at the 2009 CrossFit Games.
Yeah. It was so funny because at the time, CrossFit wasn't the beast that it is now. And so I like to say regular people had a chance. And at that time I was, kind of on the higher average of regular people in terms of fitness and skill and all that stuff. So yeah, I had a good run. I think I got 11th or 12th, just outside of what the top 10. So I didn't actually go to the games as an individual, but I think I was 11th or 12th as in the regionals. So, and then we ended up having an awesome time. We ended up putting together a team and did the CrossFit affiliate team. And it was really, really fun. We all competed with, a great group of friends and ended up taking third, I think, in the affiliate part of it. So it was super fun.
Awesome. And Adam, How about yourself? I believe you're pretty good at putting out fires.
Yeah. So I spent 22 years doing that, more or less. But, and it really was a large part of what kind of transitioned me from being just sort of an athlete and person who worked out to being a coach was that when I first promoted to company officer, you're all of a sudden put in charge of these youngsters that are working for you, and you're responsible for, feeding them and watering them and making sure that they're physically capable of doing their job. And, we had a few training sessions and intervals and some things that were taking place that kind of started to highlight for me that maybe the kind of training that we'd been doing wasn't necessarily what was required for the actual, to actually do the job well and safely. And so I really started diving into strength and conditioning. It's like I think the first book that I picked up was Mark Verstegen,'s Core Performance. And I started diving into that stuff and was like, oh, wow, this is nothing like what we've been doing. We were very much just kind of in the standard like men's health, bodybuilding and running routine, and kind of working through things from that angle. And it just wasn't panning out. So we really started digging into the kind of more traditional strength and conditioning for performance and athletics. And, as Vanessa mentioned, that led me into Robb's gym. And, he was super amped to start working with first responders and kind of figuring out some of the intricacies of that, dealing with shift work and the additional stresses of that kind of an environment, and then what that might mean for diet and strength and conditioning stuff. So, yeah, we had a great time working together and kind of sussing out, the best way to kind of skin that cat, to keep the first responders dialed in and keep progressing forward. And that, really just sparked my interest in becoming even more of a trainer, I guess, where before it was just kind of part of the gig with the fire department. It really transitioned into me, being sort of the full-time head trainer dude for our company,
Great. And so do you miss the fires or not really?
Not so much. I mean, I did it for a long time, and it's like you get to a point where it's the novelty wears off, so to speak. I mean, it's always fun in the moment. And you're like, all right, here we're doing this thing. But, over time, the bureaucracy and all of the kind of less fun parts start to eventually eat up more of your time than the actual job, so just like anything, when you first get into it, you're like, oh yeah, this is the best thing ever, and I'll put up with whatever I have to put up with in order to get to do this. And then eventually that's no longer the case. So, I mean, I still miss the guys. I miss, some of the camaraderie, and it is a little strange to transition out of something that I was like pretty good at and then have it be all around you, like being here in California, it's like, it's just fires all the time. So you're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do about that over there, but I'm not going to, because don't do that anymore, So that part's a little weird, but I don't really miss it.
Mm. So I know you guys have a mission to help people live badass lives. And what I love about what you're doing is you're coaching, and you do that coaching online as well, but then you also bring this adventure into play. So can you tell us a bit about maybe the power of adventure and how you share this with your tribe?
Yeah, I think for us, the adventure piece of it really came in when we started looking at motivation and what really keeps people engaged with the process of being healthy and being fit. And, as we had a background in CrossFit, and we had this background in really using our health and fitness to do things and to have fun and to experience life in an interesting way, we wanted to recreate some of those pieces for the people in our community, so that they could feel like, they're not just working out, they're not just eating right, they're doing this because they want to expand what's possible for them and the experience of life. And so for us, it was really about giving people, a why are you doing this, or an answer to why you're doing this. And so, giving people opportunity to go use that physical strength that they're developing, or the proprioception, or even, just the social skills that we talk about, and, some of the things about developing community and how to stay connected to people, giving it sort of a format and a place to go out and really use that stuff. And, as Allie, doing things online, it's awesome because you can do it anywhere. But for us, it was really important to have that in-person component where our people could really come together and have that shared experience of the online program, but then also have that shared experience of what they were using those skills they developed for.
Yeah. And I want to delve into a bit about the adventures that we're talking about. So I know you've got some coming up adventures in Costa Rica, Africa, Montana. Mm-hmm. And I'd love you to give us a bit more details about what that actually involves. And I'm especially interested in, maybe we can start with the one in December that's coming up in 2019, December.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot about Rhythmia, and I believe the founder, Gerard Powell, is going to be joining you. And I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So, it's actually a really cool addition to our repertoire, so to speak. And we had the opportunity to go to Rhythmia in November of this year. And Rhythmia is, to me, it really represents a turning point in what is available to people in terms of healing and spiritual development at this particular time on the planet. And, Rhythmia is a plant medicine-based retreat. So you're going there and you're actually participating in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies back to back for 4 out of the 7 nights that you stay at the retreat center in Costa Rica. And, what's really beautiful about Rhythmia is that it's fully licensed. It's got, an incredible medical staff. It's a legal facility. So you're not going to some hut, in the middle of the jungle somewhere in the Amazon where you feel like you're really taking your life in your hands, so to speak, to go and participate in some of these different modalities. Tremendous success with healing and self-expansion, and really, finding a different way of relating to their life. And, Adam and I, we were on a podcast yesterday and we're talking about our experience with some of this stuff. And, we both grew up in Northern California, and Northern California is a pretty bohemian area. A lot of people grew marijuana where we're from. It's, it's a little bit more progressive, so to speak, when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, I had the opportunity to do psychedelics and do things like this growing up, but I know a lot of people kind of put that stuff in a category of like, oh, that's dangerous, or that's a drug, or, that's bad, quote unquote bad. And what I love about Rhythmia and about what it's creating is an opportunity for people to discover for themselves what is really available through some of these altered states of consciousness. And, the cool thing about Rhythmia in particular is that these are regular people going. These aren't just like hippie trippy kind of folks that are like, oh, let's just go trip out in the jungle. These are people who are really looking at how they can expand their arsenal of tools in their personal development story, and how they can really go in and look at maybe some of the traumas that they've had in their lives, or even just some of the habits that they have that aren't supporting who they want to become. And so it's really, really special to me in particular, because I've had so many amazing life-changing experiences through some of the psychedelics and plant medicine ceremonies I've participated in. So it's really exciting to be able to get into alignment with something that's happening on planet Earth right now that makes that really widely accessible for a lot more people, and a lot more, just a lot more safe and digestible.
Yeah, awesome. Adam, I'd love to ask your experience, because I'm not sure if you grew up in that same sort of community as Vanessa, where I guess psychedelics and that was fairly obtainable. What's your experience with, say, ayahuasca in general, and can you share perhaps any experiences that you've had that you might want to share?
Yeah, so I did grow up in the same environment, like, basically all of these things were available, but it's not something that I participated in at all. I was kind of an outlier, I guess, in the community that I grew up in. It just wasn't part of my jam, all the way up, growing up and through college, and didn't start experimenting with any of this stuff till quite a bit later on. And so I can certainly share with you my experience at Rhythmia, which was, when were we there? November. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty profound, So some of the things that I think about with the psychedelics, and I think especially with ayahuasca, is it gives you this ability to look at your entire life and all of the experiences that you've had from a completely different perspective, in one way, and like, it's a little bit difficult to describe, because it's, I think it's probably different for everyone, but at some point, if you're trying to do work on yourself, or you're trying to do some introspective thought about who you are and how you got to the place that you are, and whatever it is that you're looking at, yeah, you can only really see it from your own perspective of being the looker, right? And so it kind of always ends up looking the same, and you can sort of end up chasing your tail in the space of, well, I am the way I am because of whatever this reason is, but you don't really have any context for why that might have showed up, or what it might look like for it to be any different. And what the ayahuasca really allows for is to kind of remove you from that space and back up a little bit, so that you can objectively look at what's going on inside your own, mind, or in the way that you relate to your history, and the way that you will inevitably relate to your future. It can give you this perspective on it that can finally shift something, where you're like, oh, well, what if it's not the way that I've been telling myself it is over and over and over again every time I think about whatever this problem is? What if it's something completely different? And what I think is sort of extra special about this work is that, I think talk therapy and therapists try to do this for you, right? They try to present an alternative view to what your internal dialogue might be. But what you get with ayahuasca is the experience of that. Like, you get to not only see it, but experience what that alternative is. And I think that can be really powerful for, making fundamental shifts in the way that you perceive the world around you. And that could look like a reduction in depression. That could look like, solving some PTSD issues. There's so much that can come from that sort of perspective, and being able to sort of zoom out and take a look at, how your experiences are affecting who you are. that it's, I mean, it can be pretty profound work, and it certainly has been for me.
It's interesting, and I know everyone has different experiences, and perhaps you can maybe even Vanessa might have an example of a client or a friend or even yourself that's actually experienced something and had that sort of, I guess, different take on it, and then how that's actually been implemented in your life to change for the better.
Well, I think, one of the things, and I can just share a personal experience from this last round at Rhythmia. One of the things that ayahuasca does is really help you to differentiate perhaps what is working for you and what is not working for you, and maybe separate out some of the addictive qualities of the things that you're doing that perhaps are not most beneficial, but because you have that addictive component or you have that, addiction to whatever it is that you're doing, it might be more difficult to just kind of see that without the filter of the plant medicine. And one of those things for me was drinking coffee. I've been a coffee drinker since I was probably 14 or 15. I really love coffee. I mean, it's been we are connoisseurs of coffee, and our, most expensive appliance in our house is a coffee machine. And, we started a coffee brand. Like, we really, really love coffee. And it's been something that has been a mainstay in my life for the last 20 plus years. But I was really able to see in this altered state how it was affecting me, how it was influencing my central nervous system, how it was actually creating a pretty big stress response in my body, and how that was feeding into my behaviors and my decision making. And I could really see the cascade of events that was following this habit that, quite honestly, was an addiction. I was just quite honestly addicted to it. And after being able to really see through this lens and through this filter of the actual profound effect that this particular habit was having on my life, I was able to stop drinking coffee and haven't drank coffee since November, which is pretty insane for me. And, and not that is something that everyone should have to do, or not, maybe coffee is not bad for everyone, but I was just able to really see clearly how it was affecting me physically and emotionally. And just easily just step away from it. It wasn't even a struggle. It was just like, oh, okay, now I really understand profoundly the difference of what it feels like to be with or without that particular influence in my life. And I just stepped away from it. So, that's just one small example. There's so many of these things that happen within the context of the plant medicine ceremonies. But that one's, I think one that a lot of people could relate to, because, it's such a highly addictive, and it's also such a cultural norm. We go out to coffee, and it's how we express our, we have coffee dates, and it's part of the culture of how we live our lives. So that was a really profound one for me, just to so easily and gently step away from it rather.
Excellent. That's a really great example. And thanks for sharing that. And you're right. It's such a socially accepted addiction, isn't it?
Oh, totally. Mm-hmm. It really is. And, it's just one of those things that there's so many of those things that are going on in our lives. And so it's really nice to be able to just see things through that filter.
Yeah. I mean, that's great that you could share that with us. And I guess, like you said, everyone has such different experiences with it. Incidentally, though, is it actually illegal still in Costa Rica for that type of ceremony, or?
No, actually, yeah, it's completely legal.
Okay, awesome. Because I know in certain parts, like depending on where you go, it's still very much illegal. So
yeah, it's very much illegal in most places. That's, I think, what fundamentally makes it really interesting is that because it's legal in Costa Rica, it's actually sanctioned by the country, and so there's a whole licensing process, and so it just makes it a lot safer and a lot more, I think. Yeah, just safe for people to feel like they can go there, and it's really well monitored, and it's a very legitimate setup.
Excellent. So look, I mean, that I guess is a bit of a different retreat than what you normally run.
Yes.
But a great example of something that's coming up that I know a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more maybe about the other ones like Africa or Montana?
Yeah. So Montana is actually a pretty good, like, example of what the rest of our retreats are more like, such than Rhythmia. And so, like, what goes down with Montana is we've got this amazing ranch that we rented, right? So we got the whole place with a big lodge, and there's a lake, and there's this. It's just ridiculous, North Montana, near Glacier National Park. And so we'll get the whole group together there. It'll be Vanessa and I, and we're bringing in Angela, one of our other coaches, and our chef, and the whole team will be there. And it's an interesting mix of going out and adventuring in and around Montana, and taking in some of the amazing hikes and the things that are available to do there in and around Glacier, and horseback riding on the ranch. And so we get a lot of the nature and just experience of what it is to be there. And then we intermix that with actual coaching. So we'll go over the basic movements that we utilize in our coaching programs. We'll go through some mindset and mindfulness practice and training and breathing exercises. And so it's really about bringing all of the things that we coach people to do, the sort of fundamental habits and things that we think, create this badass life that we're talking about, and putting them into practice in the field. So, like, what does this look like to, what would a super cool weekend in Montana look like if you were, living this badass life? You're like, well, you'd be eating really good food. You'd be communing with awesome people that are around you. You'd be getting your exercise in, getting some movement in to, open things up, and some mindfulness and some, breathing techniques to ramp things down at night. And so it's really just providing this detailed example of what we think this looks like in order to live this way.
Great. And what sort of exercise do you sort of incorporate?
So obviously the hiking and all of the just sort of general stuff that's going on is a big piece of it, just building in that daily movement. But then with the coaching, we'll work on sort of the basics. So we always work on a squat, a hinge, a push, a pull, and some kind of a carry. I mean, those are sort of the basics of our strength and conditioning programs. And so it will usually sort of gauge it by what's going on with the people, the attendees that are there, and we'll power through all of those basics. And if somebody's, or if the group or somebody's stuck on one particular thing, then we'll dive into that a little bit. But, in the groups of, 20 or so people, it really gives us, with the three of us coaching, it really gives us an opportunity to give some very specific instruction and break things down by the individual, and, get some good hands-on time, because the vast majority of our folks are training with us virtually. So, while there's video and there's all of that stuff, there's just nothing like hands-on time to really, mesh that in.
And you mentioned mindfulness and breathing as well. Can you give us a bit of example about what type of, I guess, breathing philosophy that you follow?
Yeah, so all kinds, actually. So we're sort of across the board with breathing. It's like, somebody said the other day, it's like it's the only rule for life, right? It's your only job. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you just have to breathe. If you don't breathe, you're fired.
Yeah.
And it's really true. So I think it's the most important thing is just figuring out what it is that you're willing to do to be intentional about your breath. So we'll give people some ideas about how to box breathe, just counting breaths. We dive in the strength and conditioning stuff. We dive into some of the PRI breathing techniques, like with 90-90 hip lifts and deep squat breathing, and and just our own sort of version of the Wim Hof, stuff. And in there somewhere, people generally find something that they can latch onto. The more sort of strength-based folks will usually gravitate pretty quickly to the PRI stuff, because they can see right away, like, oh, wow, look at that. I just got 2 more inches in the bottom of my squat, and so you can really start to tie that stuff into something that's physically tangible. And then, of course, the box breathing and just counting your breaths works pretty good for the folks who are a little more still.
And we'll include PRI and Wim Hof in the show notes so people can find out a bit more about that. And then in terms of mindfulness and meditation, is there something there that you sort of follow?
Usually I'll lead guided meditations. And, for us, obviously, again, just like the breathing, we are really all about whatever people are willing to do. So whatever, your mindfulness practice, whether it's, just silent meditation, or if you like guided meditation, or whatever it is that you will actually do, is what we sort of encourage people to do long term. But when we're together and we're on these retreats, I love to lead guided meditations at the end of the night. And oftentimes, if we're just in a beautiful place, like we'll be hiking to Glacier on one of our hikes. So, maybe at the top of that, we'll stop and do a little guided meditation. And so we just kind of try to infuse the experience with those moments of mindfulness, whether it's just taking some deep breaths and being quiet, or me actually guiding us through something. But, just trying to really get people to bring back the moment, every moment, to really being present in it, because oftentimes we can get a little bit outside of our bodies and a little bit outside of our heads. And before you know it, the experience has passed you by and you're almost like, wait, what happened? Where am I? And so we really just try to, bring people back to really being present with the experience at hand through all of these techniques.
That's awesome, Vanessa. And I love how you bring that back into just being in the present moment. And also, you mentioned that mindfulness and the best practice for mindfulness is the one that you're going to do. And
Yes.
and that's so true about everything. I mean, I'm sure you're the same. People ask you, well, what's the best exercise for me to do? And I'm like, well, the one that you're going to do.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. So when's Montana coming up?
Montana's in September. So it's the third, it goes from Wednesday to Sunday, the third week in September. Yeah.
Excellent.
And, the cool thing about our retreats is you can go to our website and you can kind of check out, each of them has a slightly different format. Some of them are more coaching based. Some of them are more just adventure based. Like, for instance, Africa, the safari is just more about being out and, looking at animals and having this shared amazing experience. New Zealand is kind of a combination of experience and adventure. So each one of them has kind of their own little cocktail. And when you go to the website, you can check it out and see what each of those offerings really has for you specifically.
That's excellent. And one other thing I really wanted to touch upon with you guys that I feel that you're doing that's very rare at the moment, and that is tribe. And I know it's such a fad word, and it became a bit of a fad word, but you're actually building a tribe. And it's interesting today's day and age. And I heard some statistics recently that it's very rare that someone, and I think it was something like only 1 in 4 people actually have someone that they could really ring or go and see and ask for help.
Wow.
And that's quite alarming. And I feel like one of the reasons for all of these blue zones is because of community. One of the reasons that all these people are living so long is the sense of community, and I feel like the tribe is really doing that for people now in today's sort of modern era. And so I wonder how do you go about really making sure that happens for people and that they do become part of the community, and then also how does someone from outside the community feel when they join the community? Like, for example, I haven't been on one of your retreats and I'm thinking of going, but I sort of feel like, oh, maybe I'm not going to be part of the tribe because I wasn't an early founder, and so how do you sort of work around that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's some part just magic, to be perfectly honest, because I think what it really comes down to is that priority, the priority of community, and the priority of inclusion, and the priority of like showing up for the other person, so to speak, is just baked in the cake with our company. And so certainly if people have been through our coaching programs, that they will feel that. But even if you haven't, it doesn't take long at all through the interaction that takes place leading up to an event, coming to the retreat, in just any level of communicating with the current community and with Vanessa and I, and leading into it, it just sets the stage, so to speak. So when people show up, they're primed for what is to come, and that they are going to be accepted, and that they're going to be folded in, and that their viewpoint is going to be heard, and that they're going to be supported when they need support by the rest of the community. And what we found is that it just occurs, and we're very fortunate to have about a 50% or so return rate at a lot of our events, meaning that about 50% of the people at one of our events have probably been at something in the past. And so they bring that with them, our OGBs, so to speak, the ones that have been around and come, they are expecting it. They are waiting for it, and they bring that sense of community with them. So it really just reverberates what we bring as the sort of coaches and facilitators. And it just works, so people show up, and it's a beautiful thing to see when somebody comes into the fold, and it's like everybody's just throwing hugs, and they're in the mix, and it's like, oh, we've heard about you, where what's going on, and let's talk about this, and everybody just gets folded in really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add on that, Allie, we really do talk about inclusivity, and we really try to stand by that as one of the fabrics of our community. And I think, like Adam said, people who've been with us, they understand that piece of it. And I think that they're really happy to step into paying that forward. They've experienced coming to one of our events as a newbie and having that, the offering of community put out towards them. And a lot of them are just really happy to then be in a position to then welcome the next newcomer. So it really is kind of magical, but I think it's just everyone in the community just sort of knows that, like, that's part of it, is really to just be welcoming and accepting of anyone who wants to join.
That's cool. That's really cool. So I've got to ask you both a fairly personal question. But before I do, is there anything else that you'd like to, I guess, share with our audience? Obviously, I'm going to put everything in the show notes, including your awesome podcast and obviously your retreats and your website. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
Just one thing that I'll add on to the Rhythmia retreat offering for folks that are curious about that, or would like to do something like that, but are perhaps a little bit nervous about that potential or nervous about that process. I do offer a coaching program around that retreat. So if folks want to kind of prepare for it and then have some integration coaching on the other side of it after, I offer a class called Authentic Self, which I really think helps people prepare for that kind of work. And so if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I might be interested in that process, but I would want more support going into it and coming out of it, that's an awesome opportunity or option for folks to check out. And that's on the website. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there, because I know for a lot of people that stuff can be a little scary and a little overwhelming. So I try to offer some things to really support and guide and nurture people through that process.
That's great. And in fact, I'm going to put in the show notes too a great interview that I heard Josh from Wellness Force the other day. He was interviewing someone about their experience who was a big skeptic of all of this sort of stuff. And he went to Rhythmia. I think he went to the same one as you in November. And so not Josh himself, but the guy that he was interviewing. And he shared his experience, which was quite profound. And so I'm going to put that in the show notes as well for people who are thinking about it, but are just hesitating. Because,
perfect.
If this big skeptic can vouch for it, then I think anyone can. But excellent. And that course sounds amazing and probably quite needed for a lot of people. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. And
perfect. And there's actually we have a couple podcasts, one with the founder, Jerry, and then we also do a wrap-up podcast talking about our experience last November on our podcast as well. So I can send you those to put in the show notes as well. There's so many great resources to hear about people's experiences that if you are curious, I really recommend just going and listening to all of these different podcasts that give you a sort of an overview of what to expect.
Great, thank you. And a question for both of you, and I'll start with you, Adam. Do you have a tattoo?
No, I don't.
Have you considered getting a I don't know, Vanessa written on your bottom?
No, but it's funny when we moved to Venice. So, well, actually, gosh, I don't know. I think I drew my first tattoo that I thought I wanted when I was 17, something like that. And so it's been something that's been on my mind for 30 years or 23 years, whatever. I don't know, however old I am. And I've just never come up with like a plan that I like that much. And when we moved to Venice, we were like, all right, this is the deal. You move to Venice, you got to get a tattoo. And that was, 9 years ago, and neither of us have got tattoos. So it definitely cycles. Last year at Burning Man, I had a big fake tattoo on my back that I actually kind of got used to, and was like, all right, this is kind of cool. But alas, I haven't pulled the trigger.
I remember that. And also, what was the picture, the drawing that you had when you were 17 that you were thinking about? Oh,
it was some super cheesy like fire thing, because it was right when I was like making the decision to get into the fire department. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was axes and shields and, flames and barbed wire and stuff like that, I'm sure.
But aren't you so glad you didn't go ahead with it? And
oh, for sure.
And 99% of the population actually did go ahead with it, and they're cringing right now?
Yeah. And so this is like that experience is like fundamentally what has kept me from getting one ever. Is like I have this cool idea and I draw it and then I like put it in the desk drawer. And maybe even an hour later, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. I mean, certainly a week later. So I don't know.
That's cool. And Vanessa, what about yourself?
Nope, no tattoos. Yeah, we are a tattoo-less family.
For now.
For now, yeah. We'll see what happens. I think we both have commitment issues, although luckily it's showing up just in the tattoos and not in our marriage.
That's very good to hear. Guys, thank you once again for coming on, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ali. We really love being on here and appreciate it.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and subscribe.